Peace and understanding, class. As we are rapidly approaching the homecoming festivities, everyone is excited with what the Jaguars are going to do. However, we should still be about the business of handling the business per se. So I wanted to do a brief video to kind of put us in the loop again with chapter 3, as we have been discussing the Harappan society, a Harappan civilization, or Indus Valley civilization, which also is called ancient India. So what I want to do is just again touch and give some bullet points about the relevant information that we need to address. Some of the things that we can extract and look for on our quiz. And hopefully, as we go through this process, we can add on to our mental Rolodex and expand our circle of knowledge, expand it. So again, when we're looking at the ancient Indian society, which is a very diverse society, I have explained to you in class about the Aryans. The Aryans were an Indo-European language group that came from the Caucasus Mountains. The Caucasus Mountains is located near Georgia and Russia and in that area, and this is where the term Caucasian comes from. This term was coined by Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, and he is considered to be the father, a German anthropologist who is considered to be the father of the racial categories that we now adhere to and categorize ourselves by based on one's phenotype. So that's interesting in and of itself. So again, we're going to just kind of touch over some of the important points of the religion, these diverse religions that encompasses ancient India, as well as just give you an overview of the Aryans and the other inhabitants. Now, the indigenous people that live there that encountered the Aryans are the Dravidians. The Dravidians were the original people who dwelled in India at this time. Oddly enough, through miscegenation and intermingling, you began to get this production of a lighter skinned so-called Indian in the north portion of the continent. In the southern part of the continent, they are extremely darker. The Dravidians are, for all intents and purposes, the descendants of those who migrated from Africa some thousands of years ago. So you have the Aryans and the Dravidians. I mentioned in class that you have the Vedic age, which is a time period from 1500 to about 500 BCE when the Aryans thrived. So this was a time period of about 1,000 or so years when the Indo-European language-speaking group, or the European, came and inhabited and thrived in the late Bronze Age, early Iron Age. They came in and inhabited this area. And that's very interesting how that whole process occurred. But the Vedic age alludes to that period when the Aryans dominated, but it also makes reference to the Vedas. There are 4 Vedas, which would be considered the equivalent of a religious text. And the one in particular that I mentioned in class that I wanted you to know about is the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda is a spiritual book that supports the caste system. We know what the caste system is. We know what the components of that system is. upper class, lower class, middle lower class, and all the way down into the peasants. But within the scripture of the Rig Veda, there is a description, an anatomical description of a human being, and said that when God created the man, he created the man with head, arms, legs, and feet. Thus the Brahmin, the first class, or the priestly class, was the head or the mouth. The merchant warrior class were the arms. The third level class were the legs. And lastly, the Shudra were the feet, which are the untouchables. And within this caste system, this was the means used for justification of the division of people according to this caste system. Is very important. And the early religion of the Aryans, Brahmanism. I told you that Brahmanism means the ultimate reality, or Brahman, or Atman, is the in Hinduism. Hinduism and Brahmanism are closely related. Uh, Another point that I wanted to make out that the city of Harappa is located very close to the Himalaya Mountains, and this is the city in which gave birth to the name Harappan. So you have Harappa and you have Harappan, which was a trade city that thrived also during this time. Very large city. It is stated that Harappa, or this area, was twice the size as ancient Egypt. Imagine that. That's an extremely vast area to encompass. Also, as I alluded to, that the geography of places historically changed over time. That ancient India and Pakistan were once one landmass. Social classifications, wars, changing of boundaries brought forth different namings of different conquerors, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, again, I mentioned also that in 1921, very important date, is the date when the remnants were found of this Bronze Age culture. Very important. Very, very important. So we have the Vedic age, where we look at the Aryans, who spoke actually as we alluded to in the other lesson, that there are 445 Indo-European language families and about 3.5 billion Indo-European language speakers. One of those languages is English, Greek, Roman, Celtic, Italian, Spanish, and also Sanskrit. Sanskrit is akin to Arabic. This is what the Indo-Europeans spoke. I've showed you some images of what the lettering looks like. Okay, so again, keep in mind that the Aryans came and dominated the north. They dominated the northern portions of India. We talked about the swastika and what this symbol means that was adopted by Hitler and the Third Reich. The Third Reich means 1,000-year reign. But the swastika is actually an African symbol, an Indian, an Afrocentric symbol, not a symbol that had been adapted by Hitler and the Nazis, or the skinheads of today. The swastika means well-being. There are multiple images that allude to this definition, but Hitler adopted the swastika and the Aryans. And again, Aryan is a word that means pure. So let's look at that, how Hitler tried to configure saying that we are pure, we are Aryan. and he adapted the swastika to go with this Third Reich, which means 1,000-year rule. And roughly the Aryans ruled for roughly about 1,000 years. I told you that the head of the tribe or leader, an elected leader or the strongest warrior, was the Raja. He was the leader of these tribes or of these groups, figurehead. And again, the Rig Veda spelled out and defined what the caste system is. So we should be very familiar with that information as well. Okay. Now, when we look at Brahmanism, I explained to you in class, if you took notes and paid attention, we talked about samsara and karma. Now we know that karma is a tallying of one's deeds that your subsequent life is contingent upon. It means that your subsequent life, what happens in your afterlife, is contingent upon karma. And samsara is an endless repetitive cycle of rebirth, other words, reincarnation. So the caste system, samsara, and karma are three pillars, if you will, which this school of thought or religious position stands upon. And they don't subscribe to the belief in an omnipotent judgment type of deity or supreme being, but they believe that the deity is non-interventionalist, meaning that he doesn't interfere with creation, but that man himself has the ultimate decision or ultimate choice to choose to be good or bad. Okay? And that the concept that regulates that or judges that is karma. It's like a built-in check and balance. So karma and samsara, those are very important. In addition to that, I neglected to allude to the fact of the Upanishads, which were books also that were composed between 750 and 500 BCE, which recorded mystical meanings of sacrifice and cosmological questions of man's relation to the universe. So we have the Rig Vedas, four Vedas, one Rig Veda, which is the most referenced, and the Upanishads, which is a document, again, that talks about the mystical meaning and sacrificial rites, about cosmological questions of man's relations to the universe. This religion was closely configured with self-discipline and self-denial, denial of the self. Okay, moving forward, if we looking at it, wait.